Please give rise to bodhicitta, thinking by all means I will establish all mother sentient beings limitless in number, at the level of perfect, unsurpassable enlightenment. To that end, I will listen to this profound Dharma teaching and put it into practice. The Dharma that we speak of today is a torch lighting the way to freedom, complete instructions on the preliminary practice of the secret and profound heart essence of the Dakinis. This is comprised of 3 parts: the virtuous beginning, middle, and end. Having covered the first, the virtuous beginning, we're currently looking at the virtuous middle, the main body of the text, which is comprised of 2 main parts: how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, and the main explanation of the stages for setting out on the path. We've covered the first, we're currently looking at the second, which is comprised of 2 main sections: the general preliminary practice for each session, and secondly, the specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the 2 phases. Having covered the first, we're looking at the second, the specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the 2 phases. This is comprised of 2 subsections. First of all, the common preliminaries that cultivate the field of one's mind stream with the 4 practices for turning the mind. Secondly, the uncommon special preliminaries that sow the seeds of the profound path in 5 stages. Having covered the first, we're currently looking at the second, the uncommon special preliminaries in 5 stages, which are comprised of taking refuge, the entrance to the path, arousing the mindset on supreme enlightenment, the root of the whole path, purifying unfavorable conditions on the path, the meditation of Vajrasattva, gathering the accumulations with the mandala offering, and training in Guru Yoga, the heart of the whole path. So today we are looking at Guru Yoga. Having completed the previous 4 preliminary practices, we're looking at Guru Yoga, the 5th. Training in Guru Yoga and receiving the teacher's blessings, the heart of the whole path. So this is discussed by means of 2 sections: general points to be understood and the points of the training in this case. Currently looking at the first, which is divided into 3: the reason one needs to be diligent, convinced that this is the essence of the path, different ways to practice, and the benefits and purpose of exerting oneself on the path in this way. Currently looking at the first, general points to be understood. We're currently looking at the first, the reason one needs to be we've covered the first, the reason one needs to be diligent, convinced that this is the essence of the path. And we have arrived at the second, different ways to practice. Yesterday we went into quite a lot of detail, and as a result we only got through 6 pages, much less than we need to in order to get through the text. So today we'll try and get through quite a bit. So different ways to practice. So yesterday there was a suggestion that we might extend the program by 1 day, but that seems like that'll be quite difficult for a lot of people, everyone being so busy these days with work and what have you. So we'll try to keep to the planned schedule and get through everything in time. There are 2 parts here in the second section, different ways to practice: general principles in making devotion and respect the path, and specific points on the different stages of receiving blessings, the approach, and so forth. So the first of these, general principles. It said in the writings of the great masters of the past that if you see your teacher as Buddha, you'll receive the blessings of the Buddha, and so on. We're on page 241. So a story to illustrate this point, that the blessings you receive relate to the strength of your devotion. The strength of the blessings you receive relate to the strength of your own devotion. So there was a student called Baropa, a master called Baropa. So, up in Sanku, the Vajrarahi site, just here in the Kathmandu Valley, there's a cave there, isn't there, near the Sanku shrine. And it seems that this was the Mahasiddha Baropa's shrine. So when this Mahasiddha travelled to Tibet, it seems like Tibet was a bit like Taiwan in the past. A lot of panditas, you read about a lot of panditas travelling to Tibet in order to gather gold, gather wealth, a bit like people going to Taiwan these days. So anyway, this master travelled to Tibet, and on the way he had a vision of a Dakini who told him, your root guru is Guru Chögyi Wangchuck. He is Guru Rinpoche in person. And if you receive teachings from him, then things will go really well. He received this prophecy. So Guru Chögyi Wangchuck was one of the Guru Chögyi Wangchuck was a treasure revealer at Teshin, and is one of the early treasure revealers. So this Mahasiddha Baropa was told, if you can receive some instructions from this guru, he's your destined guru, meaning you have a karmic connection with him from past lives, and receiving teachings from him will really help you. And he's like the king of treasure revealers. He's Guru Rinpoche in person. You must go to meet him. And so he travelled to where Guru Chögyi Wangchuck was, went to see him, and he saw him not at all as an ordinary person, but because of the power of his karmic connection from the past, he saw him from the outset. He saw him as Guru Rinpoche in person. He had that perception. And Guru Chögyi Wangchuck, from his own side, was one of the greatest treasure revealers, emanation of Guru Rinpoche. Mahasiddha Baropa was able to see him as such. And Guru Chögyi Wangchuck said, I will bestow upon you empowerment, empowerment being the root and entrance way to the Vajrayana path. So Baropa had no notion of his guru being an ordinary being. Just as it's taught here, how if you see the guru as the Buddha, you'll receive the blessings of the Buddha and so on. If you see your guru as an ordinary person, though, you will receive the blessings of an ordinary person. So it's in this vein, in connection with this, that I'm telling this story, okay? So the story illustrates exactly this point, that you receive blessings in accordance with your perception of the guru. So Baropa was a Birupa. So I keep saying Baropa, but it's Birupa. He was a great Mahasiddha. He's a great Mahasiddha himself. He travelled to meet his destined guru, Guru Chögyi Wangchuck, and saw him as Guru Rinpoche in person. He had that kind of pure perception. Guru Chögyi Wangchuck then prepared mandala, revealed the mandala, and they arranged, Mahasiddha arranged many offerings, sock offerings and so on at the mandala. And the Lama said, so the mandala had been set up. And the offerings arranged. And then the Guru asked the student, Guru Chögyi Wangchuck asked the Mahasiddha Birupa, how do you perceive me? What do you see? Anyway, this story is in one of Ji Wining's texts. You can read it in detail there. So yesterday I started telling this story, right? And I said there was something like, well, I translated as like 5 or 6, six skins worth of offerings. Seems it wasn't as much of that. That would have been like, many tens of kilos in each skin. Okay, anyway, however much it was like, say 100 kilos or something of food, like a huge amount of food offerings that the student had arranged at the mandala. And the Guru Chugi Wangcho took the offerings when they were offered and partook of them, ate them all at that very moment. That's an impossible act, right? We probably wouldn't be able to eat even 1 kilo of food just in one go. And the Guru said he hadn't even started the empowerment proper yet, but he said to the student, "How do you perceive me? When you look at me, what do you see?" He said, "When I look at you, I see the yidam." And the Guru said, "Well, no need for the mandala then," and had the mandala. When we say mandala here, we mean the shrine, the altar. Had the altar deconstructed. And you might think, in an ordinary person's mind, they might think, "Oh, what a sin! How blasphemous to take the altar down." But there was no need for it because the student saw his Guru as the yidam in the flesh, so no need for an external mandala. And so Guru Chugi Wangcho then bestowed empowerment. Empowerment using the mandala of his body. So this is something that ordinary beings might not be able to accommodate. They might even find it a bit off-putting. But so the Vajrayana, but such are the secret and the profound skillful means of the Vajrayana, and because some of these profound skillful means are so difficult for ordinary people to accommodate, this is one of the reasons Vajrayana is kept secret, why it is said it must be kept secret, to prevent people from misinterpreting it, having mistaken ideas about it. Anyway, Guru Chugi Wangcho bestowed empowerment in this way upon his student who could perceive him as the yidam in person. When the vase empowerment was bestowed, he was completely freed of all attachment to his body, just like a snake shedding its skin, shedding the skin of attachment. Likewise with the secret empowerment, the wisdom knowledge empowerment. So he pointed his finger, the Guru pointed his finger at the student's heart and said, "Where's this I? Where's this so-called I?" And with that, pointing out, he nakedly, directly recognized the absolute nature right there and then. If the Guru were to do something like that to us, just ask, "Where is your mind?" we don't end up with a direct realization of absolute nature, right? But during this empowerment, through this simple gesture of pointing his finger at the Guru's heart, asking, "Where is I? Where are you?" he gained direct realization of uncontrived natural state, natural awareness. So, by receiving that empowerment from Guru Chuki Wangcho, this student Mahasiddha Virupa, his self-clinging conception of self was completely undone, was completely dissolved. All of his fixation, reification was dissolved, deconstructed, stripped away, so that he arrived at a direct, raw and complete realization of the uncontrived natural state. That is what empowerment should do, actually. That is what should happen when we receive empowerment, when the blessings enter us. But that doesn't happen for us, does it? Why? Well, because to begin with, we don't have the perception of the Guru as the Buddha. This perception that the Mahasiddha Virupa had of his Guru Chuki Wangcho as the Buddha, as the Yidam person. It said probably to receive the Guru as a Buddha in person, you need a Guru who really is a Buddha in person. Anyway, then after the empowerment, as a result, Guru Mahasiddha, all his fixation concepts were completely undone and dissolved. All thoughts of, say, returning to his homeland, to Nepal or to India, were completely undone. And he said, from now on, even if the Buddha manifest were to arrive in front of me and offer me empowerment, I would have no wish to receive any further empowerment. Any thoughts of receiving anything more were completely undone. And so on. So you can read this story in more detail elsewhere. So, when we receive empowerment, our fixation should be undone. When you receive the vast empowerment, for instance, and the secret empowerment and so on, something should really happen when you're receiving those empowerments. But when it comes to us, then often we don't, no transformation, no change, nothing really happens. Maybe we have feel a bit of inspiration. Perhaps that's a sign of the blessings entering us slightly. But for empowerment to really be obtained, as we discussed before, two causes and 4 conditions all need to be complete, be gathered together for empowerment to really happen. So that involves certain qualities from the student side and also qualities from the teacher side. Like recently, someone came and requested that I give the whole Dujum Tessa empowerment, so the Dujum Lingpa and Dujum Rinpoche, that they offered to sponsor the entire event. I thought that's a wonderful, auspicious request to make, and a wonderful gesture. But how could I really do that, right? To bestow empowerments, to really bestow empowerments, the teacher needs to be qualified in very specific ways. Like when Buddha Shakyamuni taught King Ngondro, at first he said, well, to practice the Dharma, then you need to give up your kingdom, you need to give up your luxurious, comfortable life. Only then will you be able to practice. But King Ngondro was his disposition, his capacity was that of a tantric disciple. And so he responded by saying, I beseech you, please show me a method for training and accomplishing enlightenment that does not involve abandoning sense pleasures, that does not involve abandoning luxury. With this, Buddha saw he he really was of a Vajrayana capacity, Vajrayana disposition. And so Buddha manifested the mandala, assumed the form of the deity, manifested the mandala right there in space, and bestowed empowerment on King Indrabudi. And immediately he attained direct realization, and immediately he perfected that realization and was liberated. So he's famously referred to as King Indrabudi, who gained realization and liberation simultaneously on the same seat. So when the student has that perception, like the Mahasiddha Birupa, who saw Guru Chugi Wangchuk as Guru Rinpoche in the flesh, then that made him fit for receiving empowerment, for truly receiving empowerment right there and then from the Guru in person. So when we practice the Dharma, teach the Dharma, discuss the Dharma, whatever it is, we need to know how to do it, right? We need to know how to do it, what's going on, we need to do it properly. Otherwise we're just wasting our time, wasting time that you could be spent in your whatever jobs you're doing, earning your hourly wage. So what I'm saying is that we need to make our actions meaningful. The time and energy we spend here, for instance, and at all such Dharma gatherings, meaningful from the student's side, meaningful from the teacher's side, so that we can say this time and energy has been well spent, something has come from it. And what do we mean by what should come from Dharma teachings, studying and receiving Dharma teachings and the like? Well, inner transformation, right? At least some degree of inner transformation. So, well, if you see your teacher is an ordinary being, then that's the sort of blessing you'll get. While if you have no devotion at all, you will not receive any blessings at all. For this reason, we should cultivate devotion, and there are 4 ways to do so. So, this first paragraph here, the principle discussed here is illustrated perfectly by the story we just told. No other Buddha is greater than your own root teacher. The essence and embodiment of every one of the 3 jewels in the 10 directions and 3 times is the teacher, and there's no end to the excellent qualities of the 3 jewels. So as we've said, you should visualize your teacher as Guru Rinpoche, who embodies all objects of refuge. Your teacher is inseparable with Guru Rinpoche. So when it says root teacher, then you might have lots of root teachers, like in my case, Kamadaza Rinpoche, Kamachugi Rinpoche, Holiness Dovikinsa Rinpoche, Dushu Rinpoche, Pendo Rinpoche, and so on, Dungsatin and Oba Rinpoche. So all of these root teachers, you gather together, you condense into one, and into the essence of the deity. So whether it be Guru Rinpoche, whether it be Guru Rinpoche or Idam deity, Vajrasattva or any other deity. In essence, that deity, that figure, is your root teacher. All of your root teachers gather together into one. Otherwise, if you don't understand this vital point, how to condense all of one's gurus into one, all yidams into one, and see that in essence they are all inseparable, they are all the same, they can end up almost on the verge of insanity, like the man I met in Taiwan who'd received so many hundreds of empowerments from different traditions. He now had commitments to practice many different yidam deities, honor many different gurus. How to do that? There simply was not enough time in the day. So it came to me with this issue, this seeming conflict, and I said, there's no necessary conflict here. You dissolve all your gurus into one, all of your yidams into one. In essence, they're all the same. So by practicing one, understanding that they're all contained in that single one, that single form, then you are practicing all. That is how to resolve that conflict. Like all of the yidams are contained within the peaceful and wrathful deities, the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities. And all of the deities are embodied in the three kayas, Dhammakaya, Sambhavakaya, and Namanakaya. For instance, the Guru is embodied, the Guru's wisdom mind is essentially the Dhammakaya. So, in short, in this way, you can embody all of your Gurus into one, all of your deities into one. And in that way, by practicing just a single form, a single deity, understanding that all deities are included in that deity, all gurus, that in essence that deity is one's root gurus, then in that way you can maintain your commitments with all of the various yidam deities and gurus. So a few years back I went back to East Tibet for a reunion with my Dharma siblings, fellow students of Khenpo Daza Rinpoche and Chökyi Rinpoche. And it's been quite a number of years since I'd seen them. And in the meantime, a lot of them have become very senior, respected teachers in their own right. I was very qualified and very respected, renowned teachers, but that hadn't changed them at all. Anyway, we had a reunion. We spent a few days together, recounting our time with our teachers and so on. So it's been a few decades since we'd all met together. We've been together actually. And 30 years actually since our root guru had passed away. Some of them said, it's been 30 years, since Khenpo Rinpoche passed. It feels like an age away. It feels like such a long time. It feels like an age since I saw him, since he was alive. And some of the students some of the Dharma siblings were even weeping saying this. And I said, that's not my experience at all. I said the memory of Rinpoche is so fresh in my mind. I feel like I saw him just yesterday. And I think that's because I am constantly recalling my gurus, constantly recalling them, whether I'm doing sura or sang or ngondro or a ritual or a sadhana or whatever I'm doing. I'm always remembering my teachers. So in that way their memory remains so close. I really do feel, I'm not lying, I'm not exaggerating, I really feel like I saw them just last night. And when I said this, then a lot of the Dharma siblings were really moved and they actually started crying. They joined their hands together like in prayer and started crying. because they'd had very different experiences, feeling like the memory of their teacher was fading, and it had been just such a long time since they'd been together. So it seems the difference between my experience and theirs was the way that we each prayed, the way that we each supplicated, our perspective on that. So, for instance, we have I was talking recently with a Dharma friend, and he was saying, like some do, you know. He sort of said, okay, he was saying that had this idea that, you know, the great perfection teachings, these are the things that were practiced by the great masters of the past, by Guru Rinpoche and the 25 heart disciples, and these extraordinary disciples with profound karmic connections and you know, exceptional capacity. These are the teachings practiced and actualized by them. These days there's no one practicing those things. It's kind of beyond our capacity. So we... But I don't think that's the case, right? And one really can't say just because say you yourself can't practice the great perfection, that doesn't mean that other people can't. Who knows how many? There might be dozens of genuine great perfection practitioners sitting right here amongst us. So just because you struggle to do something doesn't mean that others struggle to, right? Sometimes we think that, because, you know, this is beyond my capacity, it's beyond everyone's capacity, and we project our own shortcomings and limitations out onto others, right? Like some people, you know, you'll come across some people who say, no one practices Togal these days, no one practices Trekchö these days, just because they're not practicing themselves, right? So, it seems perhaps there are fewer people practicing these days, but there are still people practicing, and for sure there must be some people, even if they're few, even if they're a limited number, who are practicing really genuinely and actually receiving signs of accomplishment, really accomplishing these practices. You know, like similarly, some people might say, you know, everyone is just a skeptic. All scholars are skeptics. Everyone is so skeptical and full of doubt. Or you know, all the lamas who go to Taiwan, they're only going there looking for money. You know, there's no one going there sincerely. To say such things like that, like make such sweeping statements, such sweeping generalizations, just projecting your own negativity and limitations onto others, actually you're just kind of embarrassing. It's quite an embarrassing and shameful thing to do. You're just projecting your own limitations onto others. So we should really kind of look inwards and think in a more honest and nuanced way. Otherwise, if you just think that, I'm insincere, so therefore everyone is sincere. I'm not accomplished, so therefore no one is accomplished, and so on. Well, then you're making a mistake. For sure, there are genuine practitioners, accomplished practitioners, genuine teachers, scholars, and so on. in this world, in all areas. We could say that there are less than there used to be, but that doesn't mean there are none. Consider that the sublime beings working at present for the welfare of beings are manifestations of the teacher. The empowerment and so on you receive from others, occasions when you're reading and so on, even circumstances in which you can perform positive actions, these are all the miraculous display of the teacher. In short, decide that the teacher is the Buddha in person. Now, page 242. Second, think all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are countless in number. The Gurus and accomplished ones are countless in number. They are inconceivable. There are inconceivable and innumerable beings, and yet you do not have the good fortune to even meet them in a dream or hear them teach. This is because not because they are not there, but because of one's own lack of fortune. It's a bit like if you don't have a Wi-Fi connection, you can't access all the stuff on the internet. So it doesn't mean that the stuff isn't there. It means that you don't have the connection to access it. So the great masters of the past, like Guru Rinpoche, Manjushri Mitra, Shri Singha and so on, all of these great masters of the past, their legacy, their transmissions, their teachings and practices, a stream of blessings, we can access that, we can connect with that. How? By means of our root guru. So as it says here, you don't have the good fortune to meet all of these other teachers and emanations, but it's your root gurus who are the ones who give you the connection, the pith instructions that constitute an unmistaken complete method for attaining Buddhahood in a single body, in a single life. So it's our personal teacher with whom we have a connection that allows us a connection with all of the great masters of the past, with their teachings, their blessings and so on. All of that is passed down to us through our teacher. They're the ones that make it accessible to us. Khenpo Rinpoche was one of my root gurus. He was such a pure enunciate. He lived in such simple circumstances. He never, had extra food to offer his students or people and so on. Occasionally, and just very, very occasionally, one might get to sit in his flimsy hut, in his tiny flimsy hut, and drink a cup of his tea. The delight that would give one to be offered a cup of tea by our teacher Khenpo Rinpoche. It was actually just common tea, and it was in a really grimy cup that was never ever washed. His attendant would pour it out for us into this grimy cup. It was the same cup for everyone, high or low. But the joy of this tea was like much better than getting, having a banquet at a 5-star hotel. So, I say this with regards to the third point here. It will not do to think of your teachers when they're giving you teachings, offering you material gifts and so on. So, there might be teachers who are pure renunciants like Khenpo Rinpoche, who literally have nothing material to offer their students. But as I said, on a very rare occasion he would offer a student a cup of tea. That was, he had no more to offer than that. It was such a joy, such a delight. It meant so much. So if a teacher is a renunciate and has no material things to offer their students, then there's no fault in that, like Kempochu Gyurumbashi. But if a teacher does have wealth and they're not generous with it, they don't share with their students, or they're not generous with it, then that's a fault, right? They're tied up in the knot of stinginess. So these days, sometimes we get into a kind of wrong mindset, thinking, if the teacher gives us some clothes or some money or something one day, we feel like, oh, it's such a great act of kindness, my teacher's been so kind to me. And yet when they give you teachings, a wealth of teachings and instructions, when they give you the gift of profound Dharma, we don't really acknowledge the value of that. We don't think of that as like a great gift. So that's a bit back to front, right? We need to reflect on our own way of thinking. Remember your teachers again and again, and think of nothing else. Whether you're moving around, walking, lying down or sitting, whatever you're doing, whether you're happy or suffering, think of your teachers all the time.
Server Zewata Mayim Barason, Lamala Servata Nyung Mayimba, Lu Papuyo, Mik Chimacho, Sata, Lu Papuyo, Lama Town, the Lutham just sassing you. Mik Chimacho, Lamig and Namda, Migni Chima Mara,
Fourth, when thinking of your teachers, don't just don't just pray to them as mere lip service. Instead, feel intense yearning with your hair standing on end, tears welling up in your eyes. So when you pray to your gurus, you supplicate your gurus, you should be deeply moved to the point of tears. The sort of longing, you should have the sort of longing that can suddenly transform your awareness, make ordinary perception cease, and cause experiences to occur spontaneously. So we could look at just Milarepa's life in this light. We don't have much time, but so before meeting Mahaprabhu, Milarepa studied briefly with a guru, a great perfection master, who gave him the profound instruction: if you train in this in the day, you'll be enlightened by night. And spoke about in this way about the unique qualities of the great perfection. Milarepa was so delighted to hear this. He thought, oh, basically, I don't need to do anything. He thought, oh, well, it took me just a few days to master casting down hail. It took me just a week or so to master this black magic. Here, this is even easier, the great perfection. I can just lie around and attain enlightenment. So he misunderstood the instruction and just lay around. And then this guru thought, well, you're obviously not my sort of destined to be my student. We don't have that connection. I don't think I'm going to be able to help you. So then he said, I think your destined guru is Marpa Lotsawa. You should go off and find him, study with him. And so he went off in search of Marpa Lotsawa. And when he arrived at Marpa Lotsawa's residence, Marpa Lotsawa was in the fields farming. He was plowing his fields. And Milarepa arrived at the bank of this field looking for Marpa Lotsawa. He thought, well, Marpa Lotsawa is this famous guru. He was, I guess, not expecting someone who was farming the fields. And he saw Marpa, not knowing Marpa was Marpa, but he saw this man plowing the fields with his hair all ruffled and pulling the plow and so on. So on his on his way, he kept asking, do you know where Mapalot Sawa lives? Do you know where Mapalot Sawa lives? Eventually he met someone who said, oh, I don't know about Mapalot Sawa, but I know this guy, Marpa. Anyway, so we received some directions, arrived at the field where Marpa was ploughing, and he didn't know the man that he was seeing was Marpa, but the moment he set his eyes upon him, all thoughts came to a cease, all ordinary perceptions came to cease. And he had this very unusual non-conceptual experience. This is the force of being reunited with his destined guru, with his karmically connected guru. So actually, Mapalot Sawa, with his clairvoyance, he was well aware that Milarepa, his destined disciple, his disciple with extraordinary potential, was on his way to meet him. And so he actually went down to the field intentionally as a gesture of greeting him, actually of welcoming him. And so they met. Milarepa realized, this is Mapalot Sawa, this is my destined guru. Marpa then set down his plough and said, now you finish my work for me. You finish the farming, and when you're done, you come up to my residence and see me. And so this incredible guru and his destined disciple were united in this way. Anyway, this is the extraordinary kind of thing that can happen when karmically connected guru and disciple encounter one another. Ordinary perception cease, awareness is transformed. You should have intense longing, intense yearning, it says. And when we practice the descent of blessings during empowerment, Dilgukin Rinpoche used to say, when giving empowerment, when we come to the Dilgukin Rinpoche would say, as Anyangton Rinpoche would then repeat, how Dilgukin Rinpoche used to say that when giving empowerment during the descent of blessings, it's so important to arouse really intense yearning and longing, really heartfelt conviction that as I call upon the deities now, they are descending from Dharma Dhatu, they are raining down here, and imagine that into the crown of each person's head, a wisdom deity is dissolving. This is really happening. So anyway, this is about the descent of blessings during empowerment. It's such an important point. Now there are 4 branches to applying devotion. The first of these is to never think of anything as a fault in the teacher. So when we say, don't think of anything as a fault in the teacher, we're talking about not seeing faults in the teacher once you have formed a connection with the teacher, once you've received empowerment and teachings and so on. You now have a student-teacher relationship with the teacher, right? However, before you form that connection, it's not really a problem, it's not really a fault to see faults or to scrutinize the teacher. It's once you've examined the teacher and then decided to follow them, and you've you formed a connection with them through receiving teachings or empowerments or some form of dharma, to then see faults in the teacher, that is a shortcoming. That is a problem. Some people don't understand this these days. They receive empowerment and so on from a teacher, and then they decide as if they have a choice. I don't want, I'm not following that teacher anymore. They used to be my teacher, but not anymore. Now I follow so-and-so, as if they can just undo the connection they have with that teacher. Because once you made a connection with a teacher, you need to honor it. And that involves not perceiving faults in the teacher. This being so, it's important to be careful about the connections you form, right? Instead of just running into relationships with teachers, going here, there, and everywhere to receive empowerments and teachings from all teachers without first examining, and then not being able to honor your commitments afterwards, the connections afterwards, and criticizing the very teachers who have taught you. So the lamas, students, scholars and so on here should really be careful. Best not to go around and receive teachings from too many people. I said for the average lay student, then most important is just to have pure perception. If you can receive teachings from, there are so many great teachers these days, if you can receive teachings from them, then that's just wonderful. Go ahead and do that, but then maintain your pure perception. Don't criticize them. So Penchen Rinpoche in the past was one of the really renowned, revered Lama, really great Lama. He went to Lhasa. He was so renowned in Lhasa. It's Penchen Rinpoche. He would go there to give empowerments and blessings and teachings. Anyway, this is the previous Penchen Lama. He was so revered and adored. And then with all the political problems, Tibetans in Lhasa, the very place where Penchen Lama was so active and so admired, people started criticizing him, saying, oh, he's just a puppet for the Chinese. Well, such people were to do something like that, to criticize one of your own teachers like that, is to accumulate terrible karma, very negative karma. And there's really only one outcome, one result of that, which is the lower realms. So, if you see apparent faults in the teacher, you'll be like Sangye Yeshe. Seeing Manjushri as a lay practitioner with a wife and children, his faith wavered. So you can read this story in detail in other scriptures, like Sujun Sherab Drakpa's advice, which is translated into English. And we don't have time to tell the story, but you can read it there. So Sangye Yeshe was a practitioner who was following Manjushri Mitra, and because he was a lay practitioner, he started to see a lot of faults in him. He basically developed a wrong perception of his teacher, and this was a serious obstacle for him on the path. It really obstructed his progress, his realization. It brought his progress to a complete halt for a long time, and he then had to undergo a lot of purification through confession and so on before he could progress again. So you can read about this in, as I said, Sujung Shirab Drakpa's advice, and also the various annals and histories. You really cannot say who is a genuine teacher and who is not. You cannot judge from their behavior, from the lifestyle they lead. When you look at the great Mahasiddhas of the past, their lifestyles are so varied and so, a lot of them so eccentric and unusual. Some even slept with dogs and what have you, or were just had very unusual, seemingly kind of negative or unwholesome lifestyles. So we really cannot judge from appearances. We're not capable of appraising others' minds. We don't really know. We can't say who they really are. So Sangye Yeshe received a lot of students from Manju Shimita. I think this is mentioned in the words of my perfect teacher. And Manju Shimita said, whenever you see me, you must make 3 prostrations to me. Wherever you see me, you must get up and make 3 prostrations. This is your samaya with me. He said, okay. Then one day, Manju Shimita So Sangye Yeshe, the student, was a teacher in his own right, and one day he was teaching in like a public setting sitting on a high throne and surrounded by a lot of admiring students, a big group of people, and then his teacher, Manju Shimita, came along, kind of in the form of like a scruffy beggar, with a stick in his hand. He came hobbling along. Sangye Yeshe, sitting on his throne, teaching this grand group of people, he saw his guru from afar, but he thought, oh God, what to do now? I need to get up and prostrate to him, really, but what will all these students, all these people think, you know? It wasn't that he lacked faith in his teacher, but he was still affected by the 8 worldly concerns, right? Which is so destructive, so problematic. So he just pretended he didn't see his teacher, carried on teaching. Then later that day or the next day, he met his teacher in person, and his teacher said, why didn't you prostrate to me the other day? And he lied. He said, oh, I didn't teach you, Lama. I didn't see you. Anyway, he was lying. His teacher knew he was lying. So later on, he had to confess. And anyway. The past tells one time when I think it's somewhere, I missed the exact place, somewhere in India, I think in an airport. It was many decades ago. So it was a big international airport, but very dirty and dusty and so on. Anyone, Zonang Rinpoche, great, I think Mindroling Lama, anyway, very high, respected Lama, and also very kind of majestic Lama. You know, that was his character. He didn't easily bow down to other people, this Lama. So he was there with a great retinue of students, Lamas, Tupu, like his retinue was made up of Lamas and Tupus, and very impressive, like majestic entourage. Anyway, then His Holiness Penna Rinpoche came, very simple guys, and Zonang Rinpoche stood up and prostrated him right there and then on this filthy, dusty floor. Anyway, I found that really moving.
chongse no golok chichir de ko tene chi kalda do de kurle on de kala tene lasa ge leje so ding aba marvel de ding nga zu lungba ngoshe bare se nga zu lungba gre se tene mas 다 갑견난 것도 킨서 레스에서 강하래서 랑게 파마 제종에 지 킨서 가리 인삼 거 콘수 코바니 계죠 그래 어야 콘수기 킨서 럽종당에 체부 제교래 아선다 갑견난 것도 다 콘수 벤처는 뭐지들 라마 커리 갑도 강마세도 때네 게밀 갑견난 머기니 쉬우지 강사 징줄 땅지 리네서지 야르지 땡 공바 상주 그때네 팀 야르 조이니 건 제고 롱가도 그래서 델 다른 공바 상민도 다른 때네 게부 게모즈 락발 창아 계기다마 많이 kirkiga angjamin도 강레스 야 공전 땅데 꾸마랑다 꾸마르데 야드는 또 샤가라다 이네 지송도 티게서 슬랍도 그랬더라 수치기 미치기 랍도기 말았다 단된들라다 랍가지 가지 파기 랍다 단다 쓱세를 남자 거 찌기 거 빌라사데 사르데 와 티송르다 오네 거버 티 나랑 거랑 TV 나 통소 공전 땅서게 격준랑다 셰기 말데 꾸마랑다 꾸고 말데 격준 똑도 셰기르서 티레송레 벤지는 무슨 할려라 원라마 어때 딘데 어때 인데 콩고 된 레제워서가 나랑서 아빠 아마서 뭐지 지금 말 골록 독세지 건데 니 아빠 마이 니 아마 마이 아주 미 마럽 된다지래 라마 이네 땅부도 라마 찍지 저러면은 라마 메이서 그래 라마 지금 슈슈마니는 니 자비 라마 이간제 찍지 딘데 딘데 걸라
So in short, I'm just telling stories about the previous Panchen Lama, who there's so many great stories about him, anecdotes about him. He was such a really forthright character as well. And the things he dared to say to like the Chinese officials and so on in those very heated times were pretty exceptional. Anyway, one time the stories, and actually I think Rinpoche said he himself saw it recorded on TV of him very outrightly scolding the Tibetan officials back in Tibetan officials, saying, you pretend once you've attained some high position, you pretend to not know your own parents. If they're not gonna add to your status and your social position, you pretend not to know your own teachers. But then some famous teacher comes along, you haven't even received a word of Dharma from them, but you get all excited and act all respectful. Anyway, he would point out this kind of hypocrisy, really straightforward way. There are a few other anecdotes about Panchen Lama. Let your teachers do what they're doing, even if you see them doing such things as acting unchastely. Train in thinking these must be the best methods for benefiting beings. So it says that Asaraha said, there's this famous saying from Saraha that said in the past, after he'd taken a consort, and I missed the details of the story, but basically after he directly realized the natural state, he said, in the past I was merely a Gelong, a bhikshu by name, only now have I become the real bhikshu. So, to be a bhikshu and observe those monastic vows is something extremely valuable and precious. But there are different, in the scriptures we find mention of different types of bhikshu. Those who merely observe the vows on a sort of physical level and then deeper levels. And then we have the absolute or ultimate bhikshu, one who has directly realized the natural state. This is the ultimate bhikshu. So, like Saraha, who took a consort, but then directly realized the natural state nakedly, completely, and then, as he said, he declared, only now have I become an ultimate bhikshu. Right? So, if, for instance, you were to criticize Saraha, a master like Saraha, for taking a consort and say, they're no longer a monk, they're acting unchastely, and see that as a shortcoming, well, think of the grave negative karma you could be accumulating. So there are so many stories about the 84 Mahasiddhas, right? Like we just mentioned, Saraha, who's one of them. And there are a lot of stories about Saraha, who took a consort, other Mahasiddhas who lied a lot, some who stole, and so on. I just can't remember. They're not really coming to mind right now. But yeah, there are a lot of great stories about the 84 Mahasiddhas of India. So Kimbochukyi Rinpoche used to tell a story about one of the 84 Mahasiddhas. So King Indrabhuti and Lawapa, Mahasiddha Lawapa, their life stories. So I heard this from Khenpo Rinpoche. I think there is a written account of these same stories. So Indrabhuti and Lawaha, these two Mahasiddhis, so okay, Khenpo Rinpoche would say these Mahasiddhas of India, you just wouldn't be able to, you could never say who's who, you know? You wouldn't know that they're Mahasiddhas from the look of them. Some of them would just lie around all day, others would just laze around with their wives. From judging by appearances, that you would never guess they were Mahasiddhas. It's such unusual lifestyles. So you really couldn't tell, you really cannot say who's a Mahasiddha. Especially when you look at the example of the 84 Mahasiddhas of India. So, Khenpo Rinpoche tell the story of how in the past the Mahasiddha Lawapa was in the mountains, and Mahasiddha King Indrabhuti, with his clairvoyance, he saw that he was there, and he sent a messenger to see him. The king Indrabhuti said, this Mahasiddha, I was up in the mountains, he doesn't have enough food, he's running out of provisions, so he sent a messenger to go and find him and take him some food. The messenger said, well, how can I get there, because there's a big river between us and that mountain where you say he is. There's no bridge. The king said, it's no problem. Go to the banks of the river. He said, put the provisions down on the bank, make 3 prostrations. Make 3 prostrations to the river, and then say, King Indrabhuti, through the power of King Indrabhuti's detachment, may I be able to cross this river. And when this is what King Indrabhuti told the messenger to do. The messenger thought, what's he talking about? How can he really be beyond attachment? He has so many wives and so many hundreds of children. Is he really without attachment? I don't think so. But anyway, he did what the king told him, got to the bank of the river. This was a huge river like the Ganges, There's no way you could ever cross it without a bridge or even with a boat, But he thought, I'll try it out. Nothing lost in trying it out. So he put his provisions down, made 3 prostrations, and said, just as the king had told him, by the power of King Indrabhuti's detachment, may I be able to cross this river. And just as he said that, the waters parted, like an opening in the water appeared. And so he picked up his bags of provisions and ran across the river. So he was able to get over. Anyway, then he made his way up the mountain and got to the other Mahasiddha, delivered the provisions that King Indrabhuti has sent. And he said, the Mahasiddha said, what are you doing here? Where have you come from? And he explained. He said, well, the King Indrabhuti said you're running out of provisions. So he sent me here with provisions. And the Mahasiddha said, oh, how wonderful. It's true, I ran out of food a few days ago. This is excellent. But when he first arrived at the Mahasiddha Lawapa's place, retreat hut, he was just lying around. lying around, lazing around, as if half asleep, in the middle of the day. And he thought, well, what's going on with this man? Well, the messenger thought, what's going on with this practitioner? Is he really a practitioner? He's just lazing around like some loaf. But anyway, he's the king's messenger, so he gave the provisions, and as I said, he passed on the message. And then he said, all right, now I'll return to the king. And he said to the messenger said to Mahasiddha Lawapa, but I have to get over that river again. How am I going to get across the river? And he said, oh, it won't be a problem. When you get to the banks of the river, make 3 prostrations and say, by the power of Mahasiddha Lawapa's lack of ignorance, may I be able to cross the river. And again, the messenger thought, what is he talking about? How can this guy be free of ignorance? He's like the most lethargic, lazy person, I've seen, just lazing around until midday. Anyway, he went down to the banks of the river, made the prostrations, and said what he was told to say. And again, miraculously, the waters parted, and he was able to cross the river and return. So for practitioners, your ordinary practitioner, to be too attached to sleep and fall prey to laziness, this is a huge obstacle, a huge fault. To not get up early in the morning, to indulge in excessive sleep. But that wasn't the case with Lawapa, right? And Rinpoche told the funny anecdote about someone, the teachings talk about training to sleep in luminosity. Training in luminosity even through sleep. She told a funny story about someone kind of claiming to be sleeping in luminosity when actually they were just lazing around. Anyway, it seems like Mahasiddha Lawapa, he really was sleeping in luminosity, right? Such is the way with these Mahasiddhas. Then look at King Indrabodhi, right? He had so many dozens of consorts and wives, so many children, but it seems he was not bound by attachment. So with the Mahasiddhas, these accomplished masters, you cannot judge by appearances, in short. So the Geluk tradition is so precious, and the way they honor their monastic vows and emphasize the importance of the monastic vows is a wonderful thing. But at the same time, if that honoring of monastic vows turns into attachment, they can actually become very judgmental. A teacher who gives back their monastic vows or isn't a monk or what have you, they can be immediately very judgmental of that, and that's not a good thing, right? It's too much. So you should be careful about this. So there's a really expert Thangka painter in the past. He was like one of the best of his generation, a really skilled painter. He was a Nyingma practitioner though, so whatever Thangka he painted, whether it was commissioned by Geluk, Sakya, Kagyu Nyingma, whoever, he had to include an image of Guru Rinpoche in it. Whatever the Thangka was of, even if it was just in the corner, he would include Guru Rinpoche. So he was commissioned by one of the Geluk monasteries to paint a Thangka of Guru Rinpoche Tsongkhapa. So, and the Geshe who commissioned him said, look, please just paint us this big Thangka of Guru Rinpoche and our 3 main founding figures. But please just paint it like according to tradition. We just want we want the founding figures of our Geluk tradition, and please just paint it with no Guru Mushe. Please, no Guru Mushe. We just want the Geluk tradition master to see it. It's a Geluk Tanka. The Geshe was really insistent, but the painter was equally insistent. He said, it's my samaya actually. Whatever I paint, I have to include Guru Mushe. I will not accept. He like this painter. It was his practice to not accept a commission if he wasn't allowed to include Guru Mushe. So anyway, this exchange went on back and forth. Eventually, the Geluk Geshe agreed. He said, fine, okay, if you want to include Guru Mushe, include him, but just a small figure, okay? And he said, and please, Guru Mushe is okay, but not the dakinis, not those consorts, Yeshid Sokil and Mandarava. Don't include the women. Just couldn't, he could accommodate having Guru Mushe there, but not having the dakinis there. So they came to this agreement. So the agreement was, okay, you're going to make this big tanka of the Songkamp, the Geluk lineage masters. You can include Guru Mushe because that's your samaya. But you mustn't include Yeshid Sogyal and Mandarava. Usually these dakinis are painted on either side of Guru Mushe, right? So he kind of agreed, and anyway, a year went past. He finally finished the tanka, and then when looking at the tanka, the geshe or whoever was looking at the finished tanka said, "It looks a bit. What's going on with Songkapa's eyes?" Songkapa was one of the main figures. The eyes looked a bit funny, so it seems this painter had actually painted tiny images of Ngondro Yeshid Sogyal and Ngondro Marava in Yeshid Sogyal's eyes. So, as a kind of joke or teasing, or I don't know. But anyway, now the tanka had been finished and there was no way to change it. So anyway, there's this story. I don't know if it's true, but it's a funny story anyway. This tanka painter was really famous. He said he was even a tertin himself. By using such skillful means, there's certain to be maturing and liberating numerous beings, and they are therefore 100,000 times more to be marveled at than others who bear strict vows, like the Mahasiddha Saraha, who took a consort and ceased to be a bhikshu in the ordinary sense. But as a result, Saraha, who took a consort, was able to benefit thousands and thousands more beings than the average person, than practitioners keeping the monastic vows. Dujun Rishi himself said that. So, and Jetsun Milarepa had such a difficult time with Mahabalatsa, right? Mahabalatsa was always scolding him, even beating him, giving him a hard time. One day even Mapa's consort, Datmema, I think even Datmema scolded him, and then Milarepa was so distressed. He thought, I really obviously have such evil karma, such terrible karma, and no merit. There's obviously nothing to be done with me, done for me. And he was in so much despair, he actually prepared to take his own life by jumping into a river. He was completely desperate. Anyway, then Datmema found him and consoled him, and consoled him. And so he carried on the path. Sometimes when you read about Dharma intervening and consoling Milarepa, you feel so bad for Milarepa. Even sometimes you feel angry with Mapalotsawa for making Milarepa suffer so much, actually. But of course, as it says, so why do I mention this? Because as it says here, if your teachers should happen to scold you, it's to exhaust your evil deeds from the past. If they give you a beating, it's to drive out negative forces and obstacle makers. So we can see this with Mapalotsawa and Jetsun Milarepa. Think how immensely kind they are being and treating you lovingly and not dishonestly, like fathers with their children. Sometimes when parents are harsh with their children, often they're doing it out of great love, right, for their children's sake. So if a father beats their children, they're doing it out of real love, real concern, right? Because they care. So the guru is like a parents, like a mother and a father. They seem not to take any notice of you and to be displeased with you. Realize it's because of your impure actions and obscurations. They're doing that in order to purify your obscurations. So if the teacher seems displeased with you, if they scold you, or if they ignore you, think they're doing this to purify my obscurations, and continue doing the best, whatever you can, to please them in body, speech, and mind. Serve the teacher with your body, speech, and mind. So with your body, meaning to offer them a seat, to be hospitable, to look after their physical needs and so on, or to assist them with their work. Speech, to praise and extol the virtues of the Guru, and mind, well, by practicing, by actually applying yourself to practice. Similarly, we can talk about serving the teacher with material offerings, serving the teacher with body and speech, by offering them a service physically and verbally, and third, serving them with the offering of practice. And the offering of practice is the supreme offering. Offering of physical and verbal service is middling, and the offering of or service of material possessions, well, that is the less of all three types of offering or service. So, a story about Dokyen Seyeshin Doje, who in Golok, Far East Tibet, he killed slaughtered two dogs, a white dog and a black dog. And then he took the hind of the white dog's corpse and the front of the black dog's corpse and kind of glued them, placed them together, and the same with the other remaining parts, and brought these two dogs back to life. So now you had one dog with a black front and a white hind, and another dog with a white front and a black hind. He killed these dogs and brought them back to life. Such were the amazing deeds of Dokyen Seyeshin Doje. And actually, when these two dogs died, they kept the skins, and these were objects of homage in a monastery in Tibet. I don't know if they are still there if they were destroyed during all the troubles, but they were there for a long time. So there's so many other stories like this with Dokyen Seyeshin Doje, his life. Stories of reviving beings, killing and then reviving beings, benefiting beings in inconceivable ways like that. These stories are just mind-blowing. So now we're reading through the quotation on page 243. Dojime Chinle is there. The stories of him stealing and hunting, and he was a Mahasiddha, total Mahasiddha. So as it says here, even if they're murderers or butchers, be content, it is perfect. They surely hold beings with compassion. In truth, when teachers like these deliver a reprimand, it's a wrathful mantra. It's sure to dispel bad circumstances and obstacles. We could tell so many stories of different masters to illustrate these points, but we just lack time. Someone from Lingso, I think a place called Lingso. Maybe they're even here in this assembly, I'm not sure. Punda Kirimshi. He called a sponsor or someone early one morning to see him. The moment this sponsor entered the room, Punda Kirimshi grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and started beating him, laying into him. Punda Kirimshi was an extraordinary master, total Mahasiddha, perfect scholar, and also really real Mahasiddha. Said that he was a second God of Doje, emanation of God of Doje. It really seems that was the case. So we called this student, this sponsor, to see him early one morning. And the moment the sponsor arrived through the door, he just grabbed him and started smashing him, punching him, completely beat him to a pulp. It seems like this patron was a bit angry at being called so early in the morning. He hadn't even been able to take his morning tea. And then the minute he enters his teacher's room, he just gets beaten up. And Punda Kirimshi didn't even say anything. Like, not a word was exchanged. He was just beaten up. Actually, so early in the morning he was beaten up by his teacher, Punda Kirimshi. Then he was so unwell, he couldn't go to work, right? So instead of going to work that day, he stayed at home. And what happened that later that day at his workplace, there was, I didn't quite catch it, maybe a landslide or something. Anyway, there was some disaster at his workplace, and it's like 10 or so of his colleagues were killed. And if he'd gone to work, if he'd been fit, and he hadn't been beaten up by Punda Kirimshi and had to stay at home, he would have gone off to work as usual, right, and been killed along with his colleagues. So later, this man was amazed and said, "It's only thanks to Punda Kirimshi, to his kindness, that I'm alive." Do not be concerned that by meditating with devotion, you'll please or displease them, let alone entertain the hope you'll attain the supreme accomplishment. No matter whether or not they hold you with their compassion, no matter whether or not you attain accomplishment, there's nothing else for you to do than to have devotion. The fourth branch is to always remain flexible. Even in ordinary life, how much do respectable people put up with being polite and honest with their superiors? And that is only for this life, like for keeping face and paying respect to their superiors. And for very limited benefit, right? For very limited gain. Your teachers, though, are the source of all happiness, excellence, and good qualities, major and minor, in this life, the next life, and all lives until you reach enlightenment. Therefore, you should be constantly adaptable in your wish to do everything you can, physically, verbally, and mentally, to serve them, and so on, including praying for their life and the blossoming of their activities. For any Dhamma qualities you obtain are entirely due to their kindness. Use these four branches to train in developing devotion. For beginners, it's difficult to give rise to uncontrived devotion right from the start, and you have to create the foundation by deliberately arousing devotion. Later, develop the flow of devotion, getting used to it. Finally, when you gain the confidence of uncontrived devotion, you can be certain that your stream of being will inevitably be matured and liberated. Now, I'll dedicate the merit and stop for a break.